beautiful people, and welcome to the About That podcast with me, your host, your favorite geek psychologist, your favorite pop culture enthusiast, your favorite queen of the nerds, Dr. Vanessa Hintz. And welcome back, my friends, to all those who have returned for this monumental second and concluding part to the Basgiath breakdown, focused on none other than the international bestseller Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And if you were here for our first installment, thank you for returning. If you were not, you should go back and listen to it because it was tight. And without further ado, let us get into part 2, the Basgiath breakdown, focused on none other than Fourth Wing. So speaking of Xaden, one of my literary husbands, he's literary husband 1B. I have a whole list, so hit me up if you want to know my whole list. But he's literary husband number 1B. And so another thing about Fourth Wing that I think people are particularly smitten with, pun intended, myself included, is sort of the romantic nature of the story. So Fourth Wing was the first, I wouldn't call it smut. I don't feel like it's smut. It's romantasy, right? It is the first romancy book that I've read in a long time. Because like I said, y'all, it took me 2 years to read Wheel of Time, and I don't even know what I read before that, because like, what was life before that? Anyways, I think there is something titillating, for lack of a better word, about romance, and about not just romance and not just the sex part, but the conversations about love. And particularly, I think with Fourth Wing, it's not only love, but it's also devotion. And I think that that is what makes the story of Violet and Xaden so beautiful, is not just love and adversity and how you value your partner, how you value yourself, and all these different things, but again, devotion. And so when we think about like love and love stories, I'm going to share this definition of love because I think that's a very abstract concept, and what I mean by love versus what others may mean. I just want to give us a shared point of departure. So according to the American Psychological Association Dictionary of Psychology, which I reference often as a psychologist, it's a reference, it's a resource that I use. Love is, quote, a complex emotion involving strong feelings of affection and tenderness for the love object, pleasurable sensations in their presence, devotion to their well-being, and sensitivity to their reactions to oneself, end quote. So if we had to, I don't like this language, but I'm going to say it, operationalize love, like what does that mean? We're thinking about 3 essential components: passion, intimacy, and commitment. And so passion, to me, that's the sex part. When we think about the relationship between Violet and Xaden, and before they even before they even do the nasty, Violet, again, when she's sort of like in her feelings, like, hey, you looking kind of good over there, like, what's up? When she's really starting to feel some kind of way about Xaden, I think she's talking to Ree in this instance, but she says, quote, I miss sex, I really do. And it's not just the physical gratification either. There's a sense of connection in those moments that I crave, a momentary banishment of loneliness. And so I think that in the other thing I appreciate about this story, and I think, you know, something that I think people really align with regards to romance, because, okay, like reading about sex and like the act of it is like, okay, it's getting hot in here, hey. And the way that sex is described and sort of the picture is painted in this story, and I think in many others, is that there is a sense of connection between two people. So it's not necessarily just about the physical act, because again, porn is $1 billion industry. The sex that we see in porn versus the sex that we are reading about in this story, I think are 2 different things. And that's not a shade. There's nothing wrong with porn, okay? Again, it's $1 billion industry for a very, 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 I think, good, for lack of a better word, reason. Like, I'm from Vegas, so we don't balk at like the sex industry. It just is what it is, right? So sex and porn is its own thing, right? Sex in this story is a different thing. I'm not here to yuck nobody's yum. Like, whatever, as long as sex is consensual between consenting adults, like, live your best life. And so I think that in this instance, again, in the love and the relationship that bonds between Violet and Xaden, there's something, the passion, again, is not just in the physical act of sex, but in the way that this act of sex, this physical sort of connection, serves to reinforce what we feel for each other on sort of like an emotional or spiritual level, which I think is absolutely beautiful. There's a point in the story where Violet is describing Xaden and how she feels about him, and she says, quote, "He's the worst kind of addiction, dangerous and impossible to sate." And so we see, again, as they are developing this relationship, that she can't get enough of him. And again, I'm not just talking about physically. She wants to be around him. There is a passion, there is a drive, there is a motivation to be with him. And I think that that's absolutely beautiful. This sort of second component of love is intimacy. And again, not just physical intimacy. There are levels to this. And I think what we see with Xaden and Violet, and this is, okay, so y'all, story time. I remember I was listening to the part in the book the first time that Violet and Xaden are fighting, like on the mat, and like he takes her to the mat, right? And she is describing what it's like for him to be on top of her and the closeness of them and how everybody around them seemed to fade away. And it's like, oh, I'm just looking at him. And like, I remember texting my sister afterwards. Like, I was driving from Green Bay, Wisconsin back home, which is about a 2-hour drive. It was dark. It was foggy. And like, I had to roll down my windows. I was like, ooh, goodness, like this is too much. And it wasn't, again, they weren't doing anything. Like, it wasn't like a very explicit sex scene. You absolutely could feel the intimacy, though. You absolutely could feel it because there was such a closeness. And again, it was so like deep, for lack of a better word. No pun intended, people. It was so like, it was intense, right? And I think there were other times in the story, again, as Xaden and Violet are developing this relationship, that he just was like riding for her. Like, he was, I remember the scene where, again, spoiler alert, people, right after Violet kills Jack Barlow and she gets off her dragon and she's like spazzing out because like it's the first time she ever killed somebody, and she is like throwing up, and then here comes Dane, and Dane is like, oh, Violet, like, you don't ever have to do that again if you don't want to. And then here comes Xaden, which, ooh, I when they make this TV show, like, I want them to play this scene out. Because in my mind, like, Xaden pushed the shit out of Dane, and he was like, shut up. Like, do not talk to her like that. Stop treating her like she is fragile. Stop treating her like she is less than. And instead of telling, Xaden to me is the person who says, he's honest with you. Like, it's not, I'm not telling you what you want to hear. I'm not telling you what you need to hear. I'm going to be honest with you about how I feel. And to me, again, there's an intimacy there. And Violet describes this in the book in saying, quote, "And when others are quick to stand in front of me, Xaden always stands at my side, trusting me to hold my own." And so, again, that is someone who views you as equal, as opposed to someone to be taken care of, or someone to take care of you. All of these things, right? And to me, that is what makes their story and their relationship just amazing, right? And this last, third essential component of love is commitment. And y'all know one of the most famous quotes from this book, one that you will see on any shirt, any cup, anywhere. Xaden says to Violet, "There's nowhere in existence you could go that I wouldn't find you." And once you get past the point that sounds like a little bit stalkerish, like, I think in the context, right? Like I just read that out of context. I'm like, oh, like, that sounds kind of creepy. And within the context of the story and when he said this to her and what was going on in their relationship at the time, that's just so beautiful, right? Like, I'm committed to you. Like, And there are instances and other stories, which I'm sure there will be episodes to come later, where we talk about all these wonderful epics. But part of the allure of these romance relationships is that there is love that transcends all other boundaries, right? And not like emotional boundaries. I mean physical boundaries, like I will love you in this world and the next type of situation. And I think that is what I appreciate about the way this manifested in Xaden and Violet's relationship, is that he didn't just say that off top. Like, he developed this with her over time. He did not, from the moment he saw her, say like, we're mated and that's it. You know what I'm saying? Which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And what I appreciate about this story and the way that Rebecca Yarros built this out is that you believed Xaden when he said that. You believed him when he said that. Violet similarly says to Xaden later on in the story, if we let fear kill whatever this is between us, then we don't deserve it. And so when she said that, it's like, boom, I believe her. I believe her. I believe that she's serious about that because, again, we have seen the way that they are committed to one another throughout the entirety of the story. And again, for love to exist, we have passion, we have intimacy, and we have commitment. And the way that Rebecca Yarros built this out between these two characters, again, it's like, I believe it. I believe it, and I'm here for it, and I'm cheering for them. I'm absolutely here for them all day, every day. And Violet, I'm just trying to be a sister wife. Moving on. Last thing I want to talk about with regard to Fourth Wing, and probably what is most salient to me when I think about why I love this story so much, Xaden Ryerson aside, because that is worth the price of admission in itself, but nonetheless, are the explicit discussions of dynamics of power. And not just power as it physically manifests, as in when dragons sort of channel power through the riders, through their signets and all of that. So there's that type of power, and there's also the type of power that the leadership of Navarre have, right? And so I want to talk about each of those in turn, because I think that I remember as I was reading this story, and I remember when I finished, and we all know what happens at the very end of the first book. Hopefully, if you don't, you better stop listening. I remember reaching out to my sister, and I was like, bitch, I did not, you should have told, like, this just took a turn for me in the best possible way, because I already love this story because of the way that it's written, because of everything that I've described up until this point. But when it took this turn and they started talking about revolutions and rebellions, I was like, what? I'm here for it in a totally different way. And so I want to talk very briefly, because I will get off on a whole diatribe, and I'm not going to do that, about power. And so again, in Basgiath, there is understandings of power as they relate to signets and bonding with dragons that are powerful. So as I mentioned, when Violet bonded Taryn and also Andarna, she first of all bonded two dragons, which is just some boss bitch shit, number one. Number two, Taryn, again, is one of the most powerful dragons on the continent. And so that gives him and her, like, it gives them what we call referent power, or how other people respect you as a power holder. So we see after Violet bonds Taryn, like, ain't nobody trying to mess with her no more. Like, people moving when she walk by in the lunchroom and stuff, because they know, like, talk shit, get hit. So that is what we refer to as referent power. Similarly, there is what we call expert power, which is others believing that the power holder has superior skills and abilities. And so I think where Xaden is concerned, we see him and Violet with both referent and expert power. So people see them like, damn, y'all got these powerful dragons and stuff. Like, y'all powers are tight. And Xaden is also like a really good fighter, and Violet is really good with her daggers. And so they have this level of power that comes from not only their signets, but also them being like next level, like ninja assassin people. And one of my favorite quotes from the book, so there's two. One is, again, I sort of referenced this before, but when Violet, right before she killed Jack Barlow, when she really comes into her signet and the power that she has that is channeled from Taryn. The way this is described in the book is like, ooh, I might get this tattooed on me. Quote, power crackles above me, swirls around me, wraps along my feet below me. I am the sky and the power of every storm that has ever been. I am infinite. And what I appreciate about that, particularly those last three words, I am infinite, is that we have been on a journey with Violet to this point where she is constantly feeling insecure about herself, about her body. And she comes into this power and she acknowledges that there are no limits, not only to what she can do, but to how she values herself. And what makes this doubly special is, again, further on in this scene. So after Violet kills this dude, she comes off the dragon, and Dana's like, no, Violet, you don't have to do that. And Xaden's like, shut up. And Xaden is talking to her, and he says, and this is why he's my literary husband, he says, just because you gained power today doesn't mean you lost agency. If Xaden was real, I would have threw a shoe at him, because that is a whole word. Just because you have now manifested this power through your dragon, through this signet, you're wielding lightning, no one has done that in forever and a day, doesn't mean you're not still you. Listen. If that ain't nothing but a word, as someone who has difficulty navigating power that I have gained because of my education level, because of my proximity to whiteness, because of my socioeconomic status, like, I feel some kind of way about that, and that's why this spoke to me. Just because you now have power, because this world is constructed in a way that you having these things gives you power, doesn't mean that you're any less of who you are. What that means to me is that having power inherently is not horrible. What are you doing with that power? Are you reinforcing power differential? So are you just going to burn everybody to the ground with your lightning? Or are you working to mitigate the power differential? And in that, and also Rebecca Yarros, you just better come on with this foreshadowing, which we'll talk about later. Anyways, that just moved my soul. Even talking about it now, it's moving my soul. Second aspect of power that I want to talk about is the power that Navarian leadership has, right? And so we learn throughout the course of the story, again, spoiler alert, that Navarre been doing some like messed up shit in terms of how they have engaged with people throughout the world. And when we think about the type of power that not only the leadership of Navarre's military had, but also you think about the instructors at Basgiath, because they too are not about the shits, okay? Like, they scurry. Two types of power come to mind. The first is what we call legitimate power, which is defined as a right to require and demand obedience. So when you think about the military generals, Violet's mom, when you think about the instructors at Basgiath, they tell you what to do because they can, because that is the way this hierarchy is structured. So that is what we would refer to as legitimate power. Probably most importantly, and put an asterisk and underline this one double time, is what we call informational power, which is described as the power holder's access to and use of informational resources. I'm going to take a pause for the cause and share with you all a clip from Emerald City Comic-Con. And shout out to the literary hype woman, who y'all need to follow her on Instagram. She's tight. She recorded this panel. It's available on YouTube, the Spotlight panel with Rebecca Yarros. Because of that recording, I was able to extract this audio with my Dr. Dre level producer skills. Like, what? I was able to extract this audio, and I want to share it with you all because in this clip, and I'm going to invite you to just allow grace with the ambient sound because we were in a large room. But this is a clip from me asking Rebecca Yarros about informational power and about her decision to navigate that in the story. And so I'm going to share that with you all because, one, I'm super geeked because I got to talk to her And two, it's absolutely relevant to what we're talking about right now. Random context setting piece. So I was cosplaying as President Barbie. So the whole first 10 seconds of this interaction is both of us fangirling over my President Barbie cosplay. And scene.
Yes, you are. Mrs. Madam President. I was like, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Vanessa.
Hi, Dr. Vanessa. I met you in one of our signs. Yes.
You just made my entire life. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to contextualize this. It takes a lot that's in my brain.
Okay.
First of all, thank you. I think something about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame that really stuck out to me as someone who works in diversity and inclusion is the very explicit and implicit conversations about power. I think when, spoiler alert, we learned that everything Violet knows is a lie about the bar, about everything. Like the last line of Fourth Wing, like "Welcome to the Revolution."
Yeah.
I threw my book.
Yeah.
Because I was like, yes, fist in the air. Did you know, or have you been able to? Because for me, this story is something I can use to talk to people about inclusion, power, what that means, how that affects us, how that affects our world, how that affects our truth.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm gonna say you did this intentionally. Have you been able to sit with that and really understand the importance and power of that, particularly not only for people who have disabilities, but other people, like as a person of color, someone who is marginalized, being able to really lean into this story? I don't even know what the question is.
Don't worry. Okay.
I'm just so thankful.
I'm going to give you the background for that. My degree's in history. That's what my college degree's in. And I got really, really pissed. Sorry, I'm saying pissed a lot. I'm sorry. I got really, really pissed at kind of revising our history that was coming into our textbooks, and how everything that was about our revisionist history and the inability to sit with our mistakes or being uncomfortable, and especially because I'm raising a biracial daughter, and I have to be able to look at her and say, this isn't okay, and things like that. So I did that intentionally. I was really mad. So one of my favorite lines in Fourth Wing is, "It takes one desperate generation to erase history." And it does.
Y'all, Rebecca Yarros is tight. And what I appreciated about that interaction, and, to bring it full circle to this conversation here, is power absolutely can affect truth, right? In addition to the quote that Rebecca, I'm just going to call her Rebecca like we're on a first name basis. In addition to the quote that she referenced, Violet also says to Xaden in the context of a conversation that they're having after she finds out that he has not been forthcoming with her about all this stuff. She says, quote, "The truth rarely needs effort," my dad used to say. And like the subtle brilliance of that statement, I just can't even. And I think about the work that I've done with clients in the past about sometimes. I remember a piece of advice that I got from one of my mentors in graduate school about what it's like to be a therapist. And, sometimes we're trying so hard for our clients, right? Like we're pushing and pushing and pushing. And I remember him saying to me, like, when you feel like you don't know what to do, you need to stop trying to do and just be. And damn, first of all, and I've used that not only in my career as a therapist, but also in my life, generally speaking. When I feel like out of control, for lack of a better word, or like what is going on or which way is up, I stopped pushing, and I just it's like mindfulness, right? Like I want to notice what's going on around me, and I feel like that is what they're talking about here with the truth. And that doesn't mean that things need to be easy. That doesn't mean that the truth is easy. It means that it makes sense, right? And when Xaden is talking to Violet after he has sort of spilled all the beans and let her know that everything that she knows is a lie, he says to her, quote, "It hurts to think we're the kind of kingdom that would do this. It hurts to rearrange everything you think you know. Lies are comforting. The truth is painful." They ain't said nothing but a word. They ain't said nothing but a word. And before the phrase woke was appropriated, before it became this thing that is not, in my opinion, what it was intended to be, that is how I conceptualized the term woke. Is you get to a place where you are, in what Trisha Hershey would call deprogramming yourself from the comforting lies of the world. And so one of the comforting lies of our world is that you can get anything you want if you just try hard enough. That would be cool if everybody was treated the same way. But we know that in our world, inequity exists. So for some people, no matter how hard they try, because of barriers not of their making, it's not enough. It's not enough. And I feel like that is why this book spoke to me, right? Like, again, I was in it. Even like before, like just thinking about, again, everything I've talked about to this point. This woman overcoming all of the odds and becoming this like badass writer and all these things, and this story and this dude, and he's so fine and they love each other. Like, all of that was amazing. When it got to this place, when Violet learned of the revolution, when Violet learned about how Xaden and the other marked ones, quote, are out here just trying to mitigate power and help people who are marginalized, I was like, Rebecca Yarros, you sneaky wench. She snuck that into this book in a way that I feel like I don't necessarily know that people appreciate it. And when I say I don't know if people appreciate it, it's because of the way in this country, particularly right now, that we are navigating conversations about DEI. And there's a quote from Xaden near the end of the book where he says, it's funny how people rename everything that makes them feel uncomfortable. We lost faith that our king would ever do the right thing, and they call us traitors. That, to me, people renaming what makes them feel uncomfortable. So now the marked ones are the bad people because they elected to stand up to oppression. Where have we heard that before? Where are we hearing that right now? DEI has become the enemy. Talking about inequity has been said to create further division. What that sound like? Exactly what Xaden, my literary husband 1B, is describing. So instead of shedding a light on inequity, we're renaming it and making the enemy something else. Whew. I'm telling y'all, first of all, if you haven't read this book and you're listening to this, like, I need you to not, because I just like spoiled the whole thing. And even if I did spoil the whole thing for you, you need to read it anyway. Because when I tell you it's a word, it's not only a word, it is exciting, it is riveting, it is absolutely phenomenal. And with that, I'm going to come to this last I'm about that moment as it relates to Fourth Wing. Compliment sandwich style. So first and foremost, Rebecca Yarros is an amazing human being. She's an amazing person. I want to be her best friend. I want to hang out with her. And not just because she's famous, like I'm clout chasing. I just want to talk to her about stuff. And I cannot wait till January 2025 when the third book in this series come out. Because I know it's about to be fabulous. Okay? It's about to be fabulous. Something that is difficult, I think, of all the things that I talked about, the thing that it's most difficult for me to navigate in this story is death. And in particularly Liam's death. And I say that as someone who is not all that comfortable navigating grief, not only in my personal life, but also with clients. And so I want to be transparent about that. So for me, navigating death in this story and in all of the different ways that it manifested, it was hard. It was hard. And that doesn't mean that I think Rebecca Yarros shouldn't have did it. I think she should have. I don't think she should change a thing at all. And my experience of this book, both times, when I listened to it and when I read it with my eyes, that was a lot for me. And even sort of Violet's intense fear for all of the people that she loves, because death is so apparent, right? In the space and in the world that they navigate. And the last thing I'll say, if I have not yet convinced you or fully conveyed how much I love this story, it is infused with all the things, very serious, critical discussions about power, not about othering, about how we value ourselves and other people. All of that is so seamlessly embedded in this beautiful story of love, of overcoming adversity, of dragons. Like, say less, dragons, right? Also, people just like, again, being like super dope assassins. Like, it's like a Mortal Kombat game. It's just dope. And so, please, if you haven't, read this. Please. And then let's talk about it, because that's why this episode got a lot going on, because I just really, really want to talk about it with someone. So thank you. I appreciate you for listening to this, for listening to me gush about this, for sharing in this space wherever you are in this conversation about this absolutely amazing story by a fantabulous author. And so with that, I wish you and your families safety, health, and joy. Until next time, beautiful people.